am back with our MLB panel. DraftKings contributors Garion, Thorne, Matt Meiselman, and Rotowire's Erik Halterman. You know the drill, guys. It's time for MLB Cover the Bases. Getting your favorite DFS and sportsbook plays for tonight. So first base is your favorite DFS pitcher. Garion, who are we going with?
Not as strange to do this on a slate this small, but I'm going to go with someone kind of in the mid-tier. Let's go with Ranger Suarez of the Philadelphia Phillies. We all know how much the Rockies struggle on the road. They come into this game ranking dead last in baseball in OPS, WRC+, and WOBA on the road. However, it's that first game on the road. That's when the Coors effect, quote unquote, really does seem to come into play, when those breaking pitches start breaking a little differently than they did on that 6-game homestand. So I just think this is a pretty good spot for any pitcher to be in. And Ranger Suarez has really done a miraculous thing so far this season. He's successfully and seamlessly transitioned from the bullpen to the rotation. The 7 starts he's made for the Phillies, 1.71 ERA. His FIP is below 3. So while there is some normalization baked in there, he's still pitching really, really well. His strikeout rate is slightly above average. I just think there's a lot to like here, and Suarez has been pitching well. High win expectancy in a home game. So I'll take him at $7,400 against an offense that we know cannot hit outside of the altitude.
All right, Matt, 5-game slate, 10 pitchers. Who we going with?
Yeah, I think there's a lot to like in this particular price range where Ranger Suarez is. There's a couple pitchers around 7K that actually seem pretty appealing. You have John Means there at 7,100, and then Jesus Luzardo at 6,700, who's actually managed to hold it together, I think, for 2 starts in a row, which is a pretty good streak for him. But I like John Means the most, and the biggest reason why is just who he's facing and the likely ownership on the other side. The Royals have been drawing a lot of attention lately, in part because Mondesi has come off the IL, and Sal Perez has just been maybe the best hitter in the MLB for the last month or so. So I think the Royals end up as a pretty popular stack, and then you get leverage with Means. But aside from that, a lot of these pitchers are very similar in this price range, so it's really just a tiebreaker to pick Means ahead of guys like Suarez and Luzardo. I think they're all similarly capable of doing well, but the leverage against the Royals, I think, puts Means a little bit over the top for me.
All right, Erik, which of these 10 pitchers are you going with?
Yeah, I'm going to join Gary in here. I think Ranger Suarez at 7,400 is really quite a good deal, even if you don't include the fact that he's facing a Rockies lineup, which ranks last in WRC Plus on the season. The one area of disagreement I have with Garion is that I wouldn't quite describe Suarez's move as seamless, but I'm still on him tonight. His first 4 starts this season, he did only have a 2.45 ERA initially after that move from the bullpen, but only 11 strikeouts against 10 walks suggested that maybe it was a lot of smoke and mirrors and that he would fall back soon. But instead of falling back to his peripherals, he's actually just improved his peripherals. If you look at his last 3 starts, 19 strikeouts against just 5 walks with 28.4% strikeout rate over that stretch. The ground ball rate has gone down, but it was still above 50% there. And on the season, he's one of the rare guys who is above average in strikeout rate and also way above average in ground ball rate. The one main worry with Suarez is that he did leave a little bit early in his last start with triceps tightness, but the Phillies called it precautionary. And I think in general, if they call it precautionary and he doesn't even miss a single start, I think we should probably believe him. So that's, I think, the main risk there. But on the whole, given his numbers, even though he's nowhere near as good as his 1.38 ERA suggests, 7,400 is just too cheap for what he's been this season.
All right, Matt, second base is your favorite DFS hitter. Are you paying all the way up to 6,300 for Bryce Harper as the most expensive guy on the slate?
I don't have a problem with him, but I do think there are some hitters cheaper than him that are going to go overlooked, and a lot of it is just recent performance. The Yankees are at home against Jose Barrios, and this is a game that could have some weather concerns, so this may be a moot point anyway, but the Yankees have just been so bad lately. But we know, and this is something that probably all of us here talked about around the trade deadline, is that the Yankees are going to be high variance because they have hitters who swing for the fences. They're built on home runs, and they're going to go through slumps just because they have hitters who strike out a lot and are relying on home runs. And we're in that part of the season now where the Yankees just haven't done well for an extended period of time. But I don't think it indicates anything as far as the actual talent level here. So I think the field will be off the Yankees because they haven't done well and because Barrios is a big name. But this is still a bunch of great power hitters at home, Yankee Stadium. And if the weather holds, I think Aaron Judge, 5,500, because of his price tag in particular, his ownership comes in way lower most likely. So I like Judge a lot, but I think that you basically can't go wrong with any of the Yankees outfielders. So Gallo, Stanton, good plays in my mind too. But Judge, for the most part, I think is my favorite hitter on the entire slate.
5,500 for him. Erik, where are you going for your favorite DFS hitter?
Yeah, I'm back after a few days off the show with news of this young Nationals hitter named Juan Soto. He seems pretty good. I think you should keep an eye on his career. You don't really need to be reminded that Juan Soto is excellent, but I'll mention him here because I think people might be a little bit turned off of the matchup against Huascar Ynoa. If you remember how good Ynoa was early in the season, you might think, all right, fine, this is a day to not go with Soto. But Ynoa just hasn't quite been that guy in 9 appearances before. He punched a wall, something like that, broke his hand, had a 3.02 ERA, only a 3.52 ERA in the 4 starts since his return. But his strikeout rate has fallen from 27.9% before the stint on the injured list to just 23.3% now. So over 4.5 percentage points. He's still a fine pitcher, but if he's merely a league average strikeout rate guy, a little bit better than league average in ground ball rate and walk rate, that's not the kind of pitcher who should scare you away from a guy as talented as Juan Soto. And Soto's as locked in as he's ever been. Twice as many walks as strikeouts in the second half. If you look at just his last 11 games, 14 walks against just 2 strikeouts. I think that's just ridiculous. I think that's probably one of the best ways of looking at just how well a guy is seeing the ball right now. And I don't remember a stretch of even 11 games where anybody's dominated that much. And of course, he also has 4 homers and 12 runs batted in those 11 games, despite not really having much talent around him to drive in. So he's, as talented as anybody out there and in as good a form as we've ever seen. I would not be scared to use him against a mediocre version of Huascar Ynoa.
All right, Garion, where are you going? Who's your favorite DFS hitter?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Pete Alonso at $4,800. Alonso's been red hot. His last 22 games, he's got a .698 slugging percentage and a .191 WRC+. He's also hit left-handed pitching exceedingly well so far in 2021. He's got a .357 isolated power within the split. Luzardo has looked better his last 2 starts, as Matt talked about, but for the season as a whole, over 2 home runs per 9 to opposing right-handed hitters. The other thing I like a lot about Alonso is when you look at how first base sets up tonight from an ownership perspective, I think you're going to get a lot of people going with Freddie Freeman because the Braves have the highest implied run total on the slate. You're also going to get people gravitating towards Vladimir Guerrero Jr. at $5,400 because he's red hot and hit a ball like 500 miles per hour off of Aroldis Chapman last night. So I just think Alonso's going to come in a little less popular than he should be considering the form he's in right now.
All right, guys, third base. Let's move on over to the sports book. I need your favorite run line or money line bet. Erik, which one are you going with?
I'm liking the Royals plus 100, so even money against the Orioles. I think mainly that's because I'm not trusting John Means these days. In 10 starts since returning from his shoulder injury, he has an ERA of 5.51. FIP is even slightly worse than that. So really the form he showed early in the year, which even led to a no-hitter, is just not there. His strikeout rate has collapsed again, back down under 20% over that stretch. He doesn't walk anybody, but when you only strike out 19.3% of opposing batters and you don't keep the ball on the ground well at just 34.2%, there's only so much a lack of walks can do. I mean, that's like a Cole Irvin type profile, which is not what we thought we were going to get from John Means early in the season. Carlos Hernandez on the other side is at least interesting. I think he's gotten some low-level buzz since he entered the rotation at the start of the second half. 2.94 ERA in 9 appearances is probably better than he deserves according to some of the peripherals, but there's definitely some promise there. Strikeout rate is a bit low at 20.4% and more or less league average at walks and ground balls, so I don't think he's anything all that exciting, but he's been basically as good as Means, or he's been better really than Means so far in the second half. And with 2 similarly, not close to top tier lineups, maybe the Royals are a little bit more interesting with Mondesi back. although they started from a lower place without him. So you call it maybe a wash there, and I think I take Hernandez actually as slightly better than Means in the second half.
All right, Garion, where are you going, with a run line or a money line bet?
So I should make the disclaimer that I was really, really trying not to be a massive homer for this particular question. However, we have limited games on this slate, and the Jays are at even money, having won 7 consecutive games. I think in general, the Yankees getting swept in a 4-game series at home seems unlikely. However, in a vacuum, I think the Jays have the advantage on both sides of the baseball today. Nestor Cortes has been better than anyone could have possibly imagined. However, his past 6 starts, while the ERA has been fine, he's got a 5.02 xFIP in that span of time. He is begging to just get annihilated in a start. And I think the Jays are probably the team that's going to do that, considering they come into this matchup with the best WOBA in baseball across the past 2 weeks. Obviously, it wouldn't be a shock if the Yankees do bounce back here. But again, at even money, I think you just have to roll with the hot team.
All right, Matt, what do we think?
So Erik mentioned the Nationals, and I actually do like them for DFS too, but ultimately I think Soto may even be more popular than some of these Yankees outfielders just with the recent performance there. But for betting purposes, I do like the Nationals. I think one of the things we're seeing here is that at this point in the season, the betting public shapes the betting lines a little bit just because of the standings, and the Braves have a ton to play for, and the Nationals have nothing to play for. But even so, we've seen this line actually come down a bit from plus 195 to plus 180. And I think there may still be some value there, although it's shrinking up. But the most bettors for sure are on the Braves side of this game, and it's still moving towards Washington. I think Huascar Ynoa is a little bit overrated, and I think Eric Fedde might be a little underrated. He's been a lot better in the second half of the season. But this is more just about the Braves not being as good as their record. They kind of pieced this team together with the Ronald Acuna injury, and I still do think they're a very good team, but a few of their pitchers are overrated, and Ynoa in particular. So it's not that I expect the Nationals to win, but I do think this money line is a little bit high.
All right, home plate, take us home. What is your favorite game total, Garion?
I'll go with the team total. Let's just talk Rockies under. It's set at 3.5. I like the under at minus 130. Again, I think Ranger Suarez is in a nice spot here, but this mainly goes back to the fact the Coors effect is a real thing. And I think coming off a long homestand, the Rockies are just going to really struggle the first game away from the altitude. The stats speak for themselves. They have been absolutely awful on the road. They cannot hit. They can barely hit in the altitude. So Rockies under 3.5 runs.
All right, Matt, what do we think? Favorite game total?
Yeah, this one's confusing because the Yankees and Jays total opened at 9.5 and it's down to 8.5. And I actually thought 9.5 was too low. Nestor Cortes, like Garion mentioned, is probably not a great pitcher, but I also think the Yankees are just undervalued to a very large degree right now because of how poorly they've hit in recent games. So this just seems like it seems like a pitching matchup that is really overvalued on both sides. And a lot of what could be going on here is that we don't know if George Springer will play. He's been out the last couple of games, but could be back tonight. So if he plays, that adds a lot more interest for me in the over for this game. But I just feel like there's so much potential for offense. These are two of the best lineups in the MLB, maybe the two best if they're both healthy. And the pitching matchup is kind of underwhelming to me. I think Barrios is good, but he's not great. And I think Cortes is probably about a league average pitcher. So there's a lot of potential for home runs in this game. It's Yankee Stadium, so of course, good place to hit. And I think this one could go way over the total. You know, it could also have a lot of strikeouts and no one does anything because there is a lot of home run reliance from these teams. But I think more often than not, we see a high scoring game out of this matchup.
All right, Erik, take us home. Favorite game total?
Yeah, there's a lot of low totals for games that don't have two strong pitchers in them. But I'm going to go with the lowest one here. Mets Marlins. I'm going to take the over at 7.5. I know Miami has a very pitcher-friendly park. I know Marcus Stroman is quite good, although his 2.93 ERA is about half a run or more better than what most of the ERA estimators say he should be at. And he hasn't actually been a guy who's outperformed those peripherals over the course of his career. Even so, a guy whose true talent might be a 3.50 ERA should be enough to shut down a lineup like the Marlins. But on the other side, I just don't have faith in Jesus Luzardo this season. Matt mentioned earlier that he has been better lately. 2 starts ago, he was excellent. 6 shutout innings, 1 hit, 8 strikeouts. His last time out, 3 runs in 5.2 innings isn't terrible, but just 3 strikeouts against 2 walks doesn't tell me that he's really totally figured things out. And if you look at those 7 starts with the Marlins, a 7.15 ERA, striking out just 19.4% of opposing batters while walking 12.5%. I think that's just too shaky to reliably keep this under 7.5, even against a Mets lineup that's disappointed for much of the season.